Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So, good evening, everyone. We are, of course, studying Swami Vivekananda's talks collected under the title Jnana Yoga. We're on chapter 7, which is titled God in Everything. This talk was delivered in London on the 27th of October, 1896. Now, just to review just a little bit, the Swami explained Maya in some detail, concluding that Maya is essentially everything we experience within time, space, and causation. That there's no beginning to Maya. There is no end to Maya. And as he developed his thoughts, he said, there is only one escape from Maya, and that is to know yourself as the divine presence. And if you remember, that's how he ended chapter 6, discussing the principles of Advaita Vedanta and the fact that we can usefully apply those principles in our lives and come to the conclusion that thou art that. So he himself will now review what he said a little bit. God in everything. We have seen how the greater portion of our life must of necessity be filled with evils, however we may resist, and that this mass of evil is practically, in a practical sense, in other words, is that this mass of evil is practically almost infinite for us. We have been struggling to remedy this since the beginning of time, yet everything remains very much the same. The more we discover remedies, the more we find ourselves beset by subtler evils. We have also seen that all religions propose a God as the one way of escaping these difficulties. All religions tell us that if you take the world as it is, as most practical people would advise us to do in this age, then nothing would be left to us but evil. I'm going to repeat that. All religions tell us that if you take the world as it is, as most practical people would advise us to do in this age, are we familiar with the phrase, oh, it is what it is? As most practical people would advise us to do in this age, then nothing would be left to us but evil. They further assert that there is something, the religions further assert that there is something beyond this world, this life in the five senses, life in the material world is not all. It is only a small portion and merely superficial. Behind and beyond is the infinite, in which there is no more evil. Some people call it God, some Allah, some Jehovah, Jove, and so on. The Vedantin calls it, notice the pronoun, the Vedantin calls it Brahman, gender neutral. The first impression we get of the advice given by religions is that we had better terminate our existence. The first impression we get of the advice given by religions is that we had better terminate our existence. To the question, how to cure the evils of life, the answer apparently is give up life. It reminds one of the old story. A mosquito settled on the head of a man, and a friend, wishing to kill the mosquito, gave it such a blow that he killed both man and mosquito. The remedy of evil seems to suggest a similar course of action. Life is full of ills. The world is full of evils. This is a fact no one who is old enough to know the world can deny. But what is remedy? But what is the remedy proposed by all the religions? That this world is nothing. But what is the remedy proposed by all the religions? That this world is nothing. Beyond this world is something which is very real. Here comes the difficulty. The remedy seems to destroy everything. How can that be a remedy? Is there no way out then? Is there no way out then? The Vedanta says that what all religions advance is perfectly true, but it should be properly understood. Often it is misunderstood because the religions are not very clear in their meaning. What we really want is head and heart combined. The heart is great indeed. It is through the heart that come the great inspirations of life. I would 100 times rather have a little heart and no brain than be all brains and no heart. I'm going to repeat that. What we really want is head and heart combined. Now, you've heard me mention the book My Stroke of Insight by Jill Bolte Taylor. If you want to understand in a very modern context and in very modern language what the Swami is talking about here, by head and heart combined, I encourage you to read that book. What happened is Jill Bolte Taylor, a PhD neuroanatomist at Harvard University, had a massive stroke that took her left hemisphere, the left hemisphere of her brain, completely offline. She had no access to it at all. And what she discovered was that there was a whole other realm of being in the right hemisphere of the mind, the right hemisphere of the brain, and throughout the body, really, as she goes into some detail about this, about how she recovered herself. It took her 8 years to recover all her faculties. And she, in doing this, came to the conclusion that what we really want is head and heart. Head, she identified as the left hemisphere awareness and personality, and heart, the right hemisphere awareness and personality combined, but with the right hemisphere in control. And if you ask Jill Bolte Taylor who she is now, she says, I am a being as big as the universe. So that's my commercial for Jill Bolte Taylor's book, My Stroke of Insight. She explains in such a profound and moving way what the Swami means when he says what we really want is head and heart combined. And she certainly would agree with what this Swami says. The heart is great indeed. It is through the heart that come the great inspirations of life. And then she would also agree, and we will agree with her if we read that book and assimilate what she said. I would 100 times rather have a little heart and no brain than be all brains and no heart. Life is possible, progress is possible for him who has heart. But he who has no heart and only brains dies of dryness. John D. Rockefeller was dying of dryness. The man who made all those millions in the time when millions were equivalent to what billions are now. He was one of the richest men ever at one time. He came to Swami Vivekananda because he had heard that Vivekananda was remarkable. John D. Rockefeller came to see Swami Vivekananda in Chicago. At that point, Rockefeller's doctors, their consensus was that he had 14 weeks to live. How they came to that conclusion, I don't know, but that's what they had concluded. And that's what he told Vivekananda. And so he explained his situation to Vivekananda. And he said, I'm told you are quite remarkable in your wisdom. What am I to do? And Vivekananda said, devise a way to give away your wealth. At that point, Rockefeller was truly all brains and no heart. That's how he had been living. Ruthless, ruthless. That is such a powerful word, ruthless, without any care for others. So he went away, Rockefeller, went away, and he came back in some weeks with a big document, and he threw it down on Vivekananda's desk, arranged to see him again, threw it down on his desk, and said, "You should thank me." And Vivekananda looked through the documents. Vivekananda had a remarkable way of reading and assimilating things and remembering them. He went through the document, and without looking up, he said, "No, you should thank me." And what the documents were the founding documents. Rockefeller had worked with his lawyers to create what became the Rockefeller Foundation. Rockefeller lived for many years after this, and much more happily than he had ever lived. He who has no heart and only brains dies of dryness. Now, this that I've related to you about Rockefeller is not some apocryphal story. This actually happened very much as I just explained it to you. So are there any comments or questions about what is meant by head and heart here, and what is meant by head and heart combined, and what the Swami is gesturing to when he says, "He who has no heart and only brains dies of dryness"? Anything at all from anyone?
How old was Rockefeller at the time he approached Swami Vivekananda?
And Brahmadas, you know I have no head for that kind of thing.
Okay.
I don't remember, but he was going to die well before his time. As I said, he lived for many years after that. I don't know how old he was. He must have been at least in his 50s, but that's strictly a surmise. That's not a fact.
It just seems that, like, when I think about things like that, and like when I actually outlived Steve Jobs, despite all his billions, I kind of makes you wonder if really our pursuit of wealth is really the right thing we should be shooting for.
And yet, when Steve Jobs left the body, what were his last words? He seemed to be seeing something, according to the people who were in the room with him. He seemed to be seeing something that they couldn't see. And his last words were, "Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow." So, yes, Steve Jobs was a peculiar individual in many ways. Certainly, he made a lot of money. But he also wanted to do things that created positive change. Thank you, Brahmadas. Anyone else? Anything at all about?
This is Haima.
Yes, Haima.
I was watching Steve Jobs' documentary a couple of days ago, and Steve Jobs also, when he had the brains, he didn't have the heart. To be honest, in the documentary, I noticed he did not have any heart at all towards his daughter, whom he gave, he had a girlfriend, and then he didn't even accept the daughter for a long, long, long time. Daughter kept confronting him so many times, but he was very heartless. Then later on at the end, he turned his life around. And I also heard at his funeral, he gave the autobiography of yogi books to everybody who attended the funeral.
Is it so? Wow. Wow. Well, that's something had
Yeah,
something
he
caught
bought,
his attention in Yogananda's book.
yes, he gave, I believe he bought enough books. He knew how many people were coming, how many should be invited for his funeral. And he told them, his family, to give everybody one book of autobiography of yogi. Isn't that amazing?
It is. That's I hadn't heard that before.
I,
That is remarkable.
it's on Google too. If somebody Googles about Steve Jobs' life history and the funeral and the death, it was written there too. I read it. So
I'm sure it's true. I mean, it wouldn't have been in the documentary if it weren't
I,
true. At least it's not likely it would have been.
I've read Autobiography of a Yogi as well. And there's an entire chapter devoted to M, who wrote the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Yeah, that was interesting.
I think a lot of us have read some or all of the autobiography of a yogi. Yes, it is.
I agree with you. A little heart is better than the bigger head, I think. I
Oh,
truly agree with you.
that's what the Swami is saying.
We do need geniuses like, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and all these people, but I think a little heart it helps a lot, isn't it?
Well, John D. Rockefeller was much happier in the years of his
Definitely.
life after he created the Rockefeller Foundation and began to really give away his money for very meaningful purposes. If you look up the history of the Rockefeller Foundation, it really has done some wonderful things.
I did read
Funded
about
some wonderful things.
Yes, you're right. John Rockefeller, I believe, first time when he went to Vivekananda, when Vivekananda said to him that he was so angry with him, he left that place with anger. So you tell me to give away everything. So, and the next time, Vivekananda didn't even look at his face, and he just told him what he should be doing. Just
That
didn't.
shows his attachment, though, that he's dying in 2 weeks, but he still can't give up his money.
Not 2 weeks, not 2 weeks, 14 weeks. That was the story.
Okay, I thought you said 14 days.
And it was 14 weeks.
Yeah, it was a very interesting story about John D. Rockefeller too. Thank you so much.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, Swayam.
to add to the Steve Jobs story, what I also had read was that Steve Jobs went to India in search of, I think, Pavari Baba or one of those
Mm-hmm.
gurus, and then he couldn't get to meet him. But when he was in a hotel room, um, somehow there was a copy of autobiography of the yogi laying in the room,
Uh-huh.
and that's when he first read it. And then I think eventually he never met the Baba that he went to see, but I guess somehow that must have transferred.
Well, the lineage of Meher Baba and Lahiri Mahashai and so on, particularly Meher Baba, very strong lineage. It's the lineage that Daniel Ladinsky studied with when he was in India, and one of the products of that is his book, Love Poems from God, which you've also heard mentioned from here.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, Divya.
I'm just reading about the meeting with Rockefeller in his works. And it's so interesting because, Emma Calvi, the singer, that
Yes. Mm-hmm.
so it says that after a while, as with Calvi, because in the beginning, Rockefeller, his friends were trying to get him to go meet Swamiji, but he was quite, reluctant to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But when he finally, was, I guess, allowed himself to meet him,
Mm-hmm.
after a while, as with Calvi, it says, Swamiji told Rockefeller much of his own past that was not known to any but himself, and made him understand that the money that he had already accumulated was not his, and that he was only a channel, and that his duty was to do good to the world, that God had given him all his wealth in order that he may have an opportunity to help and do good to others. And then, Rockefeller was annoyed that anyone had dared to talk to him in that way.
Yes, of course.
But
But it transformed him. Yes, Emma Calvé was a dear friend of Swamiji's and was a very influential person. She and Josephine MacLeod Tontine were quite close.
yes, he traveled to Egypt with her and some other folks.
Yes, Tontine and some others, yes. Anything else from anyone?
I have a question.
Yes.
This book we've referenced tonight, Autobiography of a Yogi, is that the name of the book? Is there an author?
Yes, it is the name of the book, Autobiography of a Yogi, and the author is Paramahamsa Yogananda. Yoga Nanda, Nanda, Paramahamsa Yogananda.
Thank
It's a
you.
powerful book.
I get so many good book recommendations from this class.
Well,
I love them all. Thank you.
well, thank you for saying that, Dennis. And that's why we do that's studying the art of spirituality together. We share what we have and know. And when Rockefeller began to share what he had, take seriously what Vivekananda said, and give away his wealth, it transformed his life. It transformed his life.
Yeah, I'm noticing that people who come into contact with Vivekananda do get transformed.
Yes. And let me just say that just because he left the body, that ability to be in touch with him and be transformed by his contact with you is not lost. As a matter of fact, he said, shortly before he left the body, that it's time for me to leave this body. I will be more effective and more useful outside the body. And if you make your desire to any of these great ones known persistently, don't be surprised if you actually have an experience of them, one that you will not be able to deny. You won't be able to say it was just a dream or just a daydream or vision or something, because of its power. Anything else from anyone? All right, on with Swami Swahananda. Swami Vivekananda. At the same time, we know that he who is carried along by his heart alone has to undergo many ills, for now and then he is liable to tumble into pitfalls. The combination of heart and head is what we want. I do not mean that a man should compromise his heart for his brain or vice versa, but let everyone have an infinite amount of heart and feeling, and at the same time, an infinite amount of reason. Is there any limit to what we want in this world? Let me repeat the question. Swami is asking, is there any limit to what we want in this world? Is not the world infinite? There is room for an infinite amount of feeling and also for an infinite amount of culture and reason. Let them come together without limit. Let them be running together, as it were, in parallel lines, each with the other. Now, this is such a powerful line of thought. If we take it seriously and gain access to our heart center, as Swami Prabhavananda, my teacher, said, no progress is possible in spiritual life until the heart center opens. Then the two begin to, as the Swami says it, run together, be together on parallel lines. And that's why I so strongly recommend that book, My Stroke of Insight by Jill Bolte Taylor. She was left only with her right brain, her heart awareness, her right hemisphere awareness and personality, and slowly over 8 years recovered her left hemisphere awareness, and now has them run together quite successfully, but dominated by, that is to say, the governor is the right mind, the right hemisphere. Let them come together without limit. Let them be running together, as it were, in parallel lines, each with the other. Most of the religions understand the fact, but the error into which they all seem to fall is the same. They are carried away by the heart, the feelings. There is evil in the world. Give up the world. That is the great teaching. And the only teaching, no doubt. They are carried away by the heart, the feelings. There is evil in the world. Give up the world. That is the great teaching and the only teaching, no doubt. Give up the world. There cannot be two opinions. That to understand the truth, every one of us has to give up error. There cannot be two opinions. That to understand the truth, every one of us has to give up error. There cannot be two opinions that every one of us, in order to have good, must give up evil. There cannot be two opinions that every one of us, to have life, must give up what is death. And yet, what remains to us in this theory, and yet what remains to us, if this theory involves giving up the life of the senses, and yet what remains to us, if this theory involves giving up the life of the senses, the life as we know it. And what else do we mean by life? If we give this up, what remains? We shall understand this better when later on we come to the more philosophical portions of Vedanta. But for the present, I beg to state that in Vedanta alone we find a rational solution of the problem. Here I can only lay before you what the Vedanta seeks to teach. Here I can lay before you what the Vedanta seeks to teach, and that is the deification of the world. The Vedanta does not in reality denounce the world. The ideal of renunciation is nowhere attains such a height as in the teachings of the Vedanta. But at the same time, dry, suicidal advice is not intended. It really means deification of the world, giving up this world as we think of it, as we know it, as it appears to us, and to know what it really is. deify it. It is God alone. We read at the commencement of one of the oldest of the Upanishads, whatever exists in the universe is to be, whatever exists in this universe is to be covered with the Lord. We have to cover everything with the Lord himself, not by a false sort of optimism, not by blinding our eyes to the evil, but by really seeing God in everything. Thus, we have to give up the world. And when the world is given up, what remains? God. What is meant? You can have your wife. It does not mean that you are going to abandon her, but that you are going to see God in the wife. Give up your children. What does this mean? To turn them out of doors as some human brutes do in every country? Certainly not. That is diabolism. It is not religion. But see God in your children. So in everything, in life and in death, in happiness and in misery, the Lord is equally present. The whole world is full of the Lord. Open your eyes and see him. This is what Vedanta teaches. Give up the world which you have conjectured, because your conjecture was based upon very partial experience, upon very poor reasoning, and upon your own weakness. Give it up. The world we have been thinking of so long, the world to which we have been clinging so long, is a false world of our own creation. Give that up. Open your eyes and see that as such it never existed. It was a dream, Maya. What existed was the Lord himself. It is he who is the child. It is he who is in the child, in the wife, and in the husband. It is he who is in the good and the bad. He is in the sin and in the sinner. He is in life and in death. Now that Swami has given us an absolutely tremendous proposition here. Please, let's discuss it. What do you hear? What does it give rise to in you? How are you hearing this, and what do you think of it? Because this is his solution.
Well, Brother Shankara, this
Yes,
page is so beautiful. I dog-eared both of them.
good.
I don't know if you could see that. I don't really know what it means to me yet. I need to maybe explore that some more and read it some more and listen to it some more. But it was just so beautiful.
Yes. Well, you know, each of the Swamis that I've known has said the same thing in a different, they've used their own words. Swami Prabhavananda, my teacher, said, give everything a Godward turn. I'm still discovering what he meant by that. Swami Sridharananda says, divinize your life. Divinize your life. Swami Swahananda said, take these ideas and go forward. Make them your own and go forward. Don't stand still. Now, what the Swami is interpreting here is in something called the Great Forest or Big Forest Upanishad, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. And in it, this householder saint, Yajnavalkya, has come to the end of the householder portion of his life. There are 4 stages of life in traditional Vedic thinking. And so he's going to leave and give all of his wealth and possessions. He was a successful person, as the rishis often were. And he had 2 wives. One of them was named Maitreyi. So he was going to divide his wealth between his 2 wives and go off and live the life of a forest sage rather than a householder sage. And Maitreyi says, so what will this wealth that you're giving me, what will it avail me? And what is it you know that allows you to take this step and leave all this behind, this comfort, this life of relative wealth and ease? And he says to her, do you really want to know? She says, yes, I really want to know. And he says this: it is not for the sake of the wife that the husband loves the wife. It is for the sake of the self. It is not for the sake of the husband that the wife loves the husband. It is for the sake of the self. Capital S, self. And he goes on, you can read it in the Upanishad. He goes on at some length, naming the things that we seem to have a feeling for and relationship with in this world. And he says, it is not for the sake of that thing that you are drawn to it. It is for the sake of the self that is manifest in it. And that's what the Swami is saying here. That's what Swami Vivekananda is saying. It is the self that, and people get very attached to their ideas of it, even though their ideas may be very worldly. They're very attached to the self that appears, that because they've got some sort of relationship with that self.
Shankara,
Yes, please, Haima.
can I say something about the self since we are talking about?
Yes, please, of
If
course.
we don't have a good relationship with the self, if we are not friend to our own self, then we can't be friend to the world around us too. That is where I think the meditation helps, going deep down, self-realization, finding self and the divinity within ourselves. That helps a lot to do with the world around us. That self is so
This indeed is the solution as presented by the deep thinkers, the mystics of every religion, Haima. You're right.
thank you.
You must come to know and love the self within yourself.
Exactly. We have to make friendship with the self.
And
Love the
this is why you've heard it said from here that the practice of prayer, contemplation, concentration, and meditation, you, in doing that, practicing those things regularly, routinely,
Exactly.
for a long period of time, what happens is you encounter something truly remarkable.
Yes.
You encounter this presence within yourself
Agree. 100%.
that is watching all this happen.
That's true.
You find the witness. You find the witness that sees you praying, contemplating, concentrating, meditating. That is the face. That is the face within time, space, and causation of the self. The self is sometimes called the Atman. The witness is the face within time, space, and causation, something you can experience. That's what I mean by within time, space, and causation. The witness is something you can experience. And when you discover it, you discover, oh, all this is happening in front of the witness. The witness is seeing all this, is witnessing all this happening. And the metaphor that was used by Swami Vivekananda was as if you are watching a picture show.
Yes. Agree with you.
He was Swami Vivekananda was, in a sense, a part of the Hollywood community.
Agree with you. 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaime. And so, he used the metaphors of motion pictures very easily. So you begin to see that what is taking place in front of you, in front of your awareness, is this play of time, space, and causation, of Maya. But it is not you. You have this absolute conviction after some time to know this is who I am. This is who I am, not all of these things that I am doing or seem to be doing. And so this is the encounter with yourself that Jaime was talking about. And once you are aware that that is the truth of your being, it becomes absolutely crystal clear that that is the truth of everyone else's being as well.
Exactly.
It's not just you. How could it just be you? No, it is the truth of everyone's being. And so then you begin to see it is he who is in the good and the bad. He is in the sin and in the sinner. He is in life and in death. All that occurs in your awareness, in your experience, you're witnessing as that he or she, or actually it. But it's a long time before we get rid of this sense of gender awareness.
Brother Shankara.
Yes.
I really like this. I was reading it over again, and I'd like to get your perspective or anyone else's on an understanding that I've come to.
Uh-huh.
He says, "Give up the world which you have conjectured,
Mm-hmm.
because your conjecture was based upon a very partial experience."
Mm-hmm.
So let me just stop there. What we have conjectured and our very partial experience, I interpret as the veil of Maya through which we, our lower self, lowercase self, the ego self, is interpreting this world, which he
Yes.
goes on to say is upon very poor reasoning and upon your own weakness. Absolutely, our weakness is not of the higher self. It must be of the ego. That must be where the weakness resides.
Yes, but the weakness is built in. It's not something that's personal to you. It's not your weakness in the sense of something wrong with you. It's simply that we are infinite beings in an infinite realm with this finite capability.
Right. And so he goes on to say, give it up. The world we have been thinking of so long, the world to which we have been clinging to. I mean, if your ego's not doing the clinging, what's doing the clinging exactly?
It is
A
the
false
ego.
world of our own creation. Give that up. Open your eyes and see that such never existed. I mean, there's so many ways to interpret it, but it's like, I think he's trying to get you to realize it was a dream. Well, who created the dream? I mean, each individual is,
Brahman created the dream.
but each individual is seeing it in their own way.
Yes, by their own volition,
Mm-hmm.
for their own purposes.
Mm-hmm.
As Krishna explains in the Gita, the Atman has this aspect of wanting to experience what it experiences, and therefore, as Krishna says, validating it.
Mm.
But the Swami is saying, if you want freedom, and ultimately each of us does come to this point of wanting freedom, then you must give up that enjoyment of experience.
Right. And so, I mean, let's just say from a Western way of thinking, what is it that we attribute to the experiences? I mean, maybe I don't have enough knowledge about this, but I think that the individual, however you describe them, has developed through time, space, and causation with all the various experiences that they've had, the other influences that they've had to pursue X, Y, or Z.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's pleasure or pain or whatever it is, I mean, that is what it must be. It's kind of obvious what we're all doing, right? I mean, even sitting here right now.
Yes, exactly. Well said.
And so if you see and realize that that's what other human beings around you are also challenged with, if we want to call it that,
I like that expression. Yes.
then yeah, I mean, you know what you need to do. What I really appreciate is I don't think we got into anything here that said it, but I think what you added here was the idea of relationship.
Yes.
Even if you up and leave, it's not as if that relationship is cut. It'll always be there.
The relationship is eternal,
right,
finite,
it's
changeless.
I love Swami Vivekananda's way of explaining. I just love his work. It's amazing.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Well, I think all of what you said is right on the money. And when we discover this about ourselves, then, as Haima was pointing out, before we discover it in ourselves, it's just a thought. It's just another intellectual construction. It's interesting. It's powerful. It may be persuasive, but it's not determinative. As Swami Swahananda is the Swami who sent me here to Atlanta. As he said, the only true measure of spiritual progress is change in behavior. Our intellectual ideas, we may hold them dearly and we may cherish them, but they do not typically change our behavior. What changes our behavior is experience. And so when we have the experience of the self, first as the witness, we see, wait a minute, I'm sitting here doing this meditation, practicing this meditation. I'm doing japa meditation, and I'm counting the mantra on my fingers, and I'm saying the mantra, and the effects take place. But all of that is something is witnessing that, something is experiencing that. And that something is not the thing itself, not the thing being experienced. It doesn't alter on the basis of what it experiences. But its experiences may change the left mind, the left hemisphere decisions enough to change the behavior. Because we've seen something that is utterly new to us.
Yeah, that, I mean, it makes total sense. It's a very intellectual point that he's making, but that's not enough to convince someone. Not that we're here to convince anybody of anything except for ourselves, really, I suppose. But you can't really appreciate the fullness of what he's trying to say until you've gone through some type of meditative practice, I think, and realize that what he's saying is true. It's you otherwise don't have conviction. You don't
Right.
know it. You just know it
Exactly.
intellectually.
And it's out of conviction that change arises. This is so beautifully explained by Adi Shankaracharya and Vivekananda, the crest jewel of discrimination. It's only when you come to the conviction of the truth that you can then insist on the truth. And then that changes your life. Anything else from anyone? This is exactly what we should be doing. We're chewing this up, we're swallowing it, and we'll assimilate it.
Well, I was thinking. Oh,
Go ahead, Divya.
oh no, go ahead, Katrina. I'll wait. Don't worry.
Please, Katrina, go ahead.
Okay. I in terms of the witness.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of a shift should happen, or is it a gradual shift when you start seeing that, okay, there's an aspect of me that is observing me,
Mm-hmm.
but in experiencing that, but how much of a degree, how much of a change should happen, or is that a gradual? I don't even know how to answer the question, because it's like you can see the witness observing. You can see the witness observing what's going on.
Yes.
But in terms of making it I guess a way of being, is it to make that a way of being as much as possible throughout your day, that you stay in that as much as possible in that witness, be aware of that witness?
That happens spontaneously, Katrina. So there is no should, there is no doctrine or dogma here.
Okay.
It happens spontaneously. As you discover, I'm praying. Prayer is going on. prayer is having its effects. But there's something beyond that doing, that praying, and the effects of the praying. There's that which is seeing all this.
Right.
And it does not have these sensations. It's not the one having the feelings. It's not the feeling of the spirit arising in us through prayer. No, it's something else. And we get this sense, yes, this is the witness. This is, and as you said, eventually it comes to where that is who you identify yourself as. And so it persists through the day, as you asked. Yes, it persists through the day. You'll slip in and out of it. You'll get entangled. And suddenly you feel like I'm doing this and oh, this is bad, or oh, this is wonderful. And it'll sweep you away. But then you'll return. And over time, long time, you gain this sense, that is who this is. The reason that you come to that feeling is because you have, as you experience that, it's still an experience, but as you experience that, it is much freer. It isn't even a question of happy. There just isn't that question of happiness and unhappiness there. It's just free. And there's a bliss in being in that awareness. So it's not happiness in the ordinary sense of the way we use the word, but it's bliss. This Sunday, I will talk about Chaitanya's prayer. And one of the lines in that prayer is, O self, drown deep in the waves of his bliss. And that's what happens. And so it relieves you of the immediacy of pain, and for that matter, of pleasure. It's something you see yourself as witnessing. It's something that happens because of this action and experience suit, with its 5 organs of perception and its 5 organs of action, and its uncountable mental impressions that are triggered by experiences so that we recognize what's going on around us. But it is for the sake of that self that we exist, not for the sake of the 5 organs of perception and the 5 organs of action, or all that they and the gunas and the mental impressions, all that generates. That's something that you see happening in your presence. Thank you, Katrina. That was a very pregnant question.
Thank you, Brother Shankar.
Divya?
Yes, Brother Shankara. I was thinking of what Swamiji was saying about see God in your children, you know, see God in your parents, see God, you know, but then it's because like we cling to life, as he says, you know, but this life is temporary, and your parents belong to God, your children belong to God, and it seems scary to us, but God can take them away at any time, just like he brought them here. And that's kind of, that lack of control is what makes us fear that we're going to lose people or lose our money or lose, or lose, as though we actually even possessed it in the first place,
Very well said.
And then it just goes to, thinking about Katrina's, just the question she just asked about witnessing, a little further down, he goes back to that movie theater example that you brought up, but he says the universe is like a picture gallery. But the person who's selling the painting is not really looking at the painting. They're worried about, well, what am I going to make off of it, And so it's just, it goes back to the Gita. We're not the doers.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. That is so interesting when one comes to this witness awareness. It's so clear that the witness is not the doer. It is this thing that has been created, this action and experience suit with all of its attributes, that is the doing, and it isn't, as you pointed out, ours at all. Not only can other people be taken away, people we love or treasure, this thing can be taken away in an instant. And so best not to be too attached to it.
Yeah. I mean, even the Christians, as they say, ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Yes, yes. And, if we listen to Christ, Christ says, seek ye first the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is within. If there's a kingdom of God within, there's a king within. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else shall be added unto you. All of this knowledge. And as we make the attempt to find the kingdom of God, to find the king in the kingdom of God, we come to understand that that is the truth of our being, not that which is doing the seeking.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
So, Brother Shankara, is the witness the king?
Yes, it is. The witness, as we experience it, is the face of the king.
Okay.
The
That's
face
the king.
of the king. The king is the Atman, or Brahman, or the divine presence. Call it by whatever name you will. But it is that which is infinite, eternal, changeless. And that is the king.
That's in all of us. Okay, thank you, Brother Shankara.
Thank you, dear.
Brother Shankara?
Yes.
Yes, I was thinking more like when you're talking about the witness self, I was thinking, or the movie, we are just kind of like thinking of ourselves as we are playing a role. It's like role playing in a play. And when the play is over, our role is finished. And while we are playing the role, one way is to have, like you said, not be attached to it, or also think that this too shall pass. It's just a transient role, which is come and go.
Yes, as Divya said, ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
So when he says give up the world, does that mean total renunciation?
No, no. He doesn't say give up the world. He says deify the world. See that it is the divine that you are witnessing that there is only the divine.
In a sense, though, that is giving up the world, because it really puts the world in a different perspective from the way you're used to looking at it.
Well, we give up our entanglement. We give up our ability to be pushed around by it nearly so much. As I said, the entanglement comes and goes. We get swept away. But that it's how soon do you return to centeredness? You know, there's wonderful big dolls. They're clown dolls, and they're weighted in the bottom. And if you bat the doll, it goes whoa, whoa, whoa. But because it's weighted in the bottom, it quickly comes back to standing upright. That's us. The more we practice, the world will whack us and we'll go, whoa, whoa. But how soon do we return to top dead center?
Right, and that's where chanting your mantra comes in, is it helps you to return to an even keel. You're getting knocked around.
Yes, that is our greatest, that becomes our greatest friend.
And it's not just the world, but your emotions that can knock you about as well.
Well, that is the world. Your emotions are the world.
Yeah. Actually, that's a major part, emotions.
Yes. And this is the thing. Remarkably, the emotions are not of the heart. When we discover the heart, we find that the emotions are not of the heart. They are something of the mind. So it's a little after 9 o'clock. It doesn't mean we need to stop, but we will if there's nothing else from anyone.
I just have,
Brother,
go ahead. Someone else wants to go ahead. That's fine.
Brother Shankara, this is fine. I was just going to say that sometimes I like that that version that when Brahman, the one, decides to become many, Brahman is so good at what she does that he forgets himself in the many.
Yes.
So we can rest assured that Brahman will find its way back as well.
Oh, that's exactly what every one of the saints tells us. Don't worry about a thing, dear. You're finding your way back. And it is Saint Teresa of Avila says, and she is a great saint. I recommend her reading about her and her works. She said, it is only in us that God becomes so lost that he asks questions. That's part of her poem, Every Prophet's Name. But there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. As long as we feel like there's something wrong, then that pushes us to go forward. Wonderful. But ultimately we find there is and never was anything wrong. And what Swayam was pointing to is in the Chandogya Upanishad, Brahman says, this is an approximate translation, but it'll do. Brahman, within the cosmic mind, arises this thought: I am one, I shall become many. We are the many. The dream of Brahman begins. The dream of manyness. And that's the reason, as Swayam was alluding to, that the dream is so compelling and convincing, is because it is Brahman's dream and it contains all of the power of Brahman. And in Sanskrit, the word is Mahamaya or Mahashakti, the power of the dream unfolding in front of each of us. But we are the dreamer, not the dream. And so the Swami is saying to us, and I like the word that was used earlier, the Swami is challenging us to deify the dream. Deify the dream. See the divine. It's like that verse from the Gita, which is often chanted before taking food. Om Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagno Brahmana Uttam Brahma Evatena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. Brahman is the offering. Brahman is the ritual. Brahman is she or he who offers to the fire that is Brahman. He or she who sees Brahman in every action attains to Brahman. What it is saying is, this is Brahman's dream. Brahman is in every action because Brahman is the dreamer, Brahman is the dreamed, and Brahman is the dreaming. And that's what the Swami is leading us to here. And the fact that we sit here as these many people, these wonderful people who appear on the screen, that's exactly as it should be. And so we are hearing, digesting. Oh, this doesn't need to overwhelm me. I am the dreamer. I am the dream. I am the dreaming. And so is everything else and everyone else. Anything else from anyone?
Yeah, Brother Shankara, this is Katrina.
Yes.
That brings up the question. So if I look at, let's say I'm dealing with someone, and so I see myself as a witness, and I'm the dreamer, and dreaming. But I know that they're the dreamer, and dreaming. So in terms of engaging with that another person, I'm trying to incorporate this in living. So so in engaging with that person, so do I just keep in mind that both of us are dreamers and dreaming? And so then that puts me in a different space or different way of communicating with that person, because then I know that we're both dreaming, but then we can affect the output of the dream.
And how differently you see them, even though they may be an antagonist, or they may be a client, or they may, whoever they may be, because you look on them with this knowledge that has been gained from the experience of being the witness. You look at them as I think it's Kabir says, you can look at them and be the person with the full moon in your eyes. And what does this mean? You look on them with this shining radiance of knowing that whatever is happening it is part of this divine dream. And so if you look on them that way, they cannot help, as any therapist will tell you, they cannot help but in some measure respond in kind. So it transforms our relationship with human beings. This is something that we'll study it at some point. We've been studying it this month, last month. Karma yoga, the yoga of being in the world and how to be in the world. And what does Krishna says? He says, deify everything. Offer it all to me. See it as my creation. See it as my doing. Offer it to me. But I don't want to get too sidetracked here. But thank you, Katrina. That's right. It affects everything we do.
Thank you.
And it doesn't happen quickly, dear. And it cannot be forced. There's no should. There's no must. It needs to arise spontaneously in you. The full moon will rise in your eyes when you feel it in your heart. Anyone else?
I just have one comment, Brother Shankara.
Yes, dear.
Leave. I know it's getting late. My Swami never said give up the world. He said give up the world which you have conjectured,
Yes.
who imagined, because it is all because of partial experience, poor reasoning, and upon your own weaknesses. That's what we created a world. We put them in the thought bank, and every time something comes up, we pull that thought and then we throw it out. That is what he's telling us, to give up that part of that type of the world, not
Precisely.
the right.
And how to give it up. He doesn't say throw it away.
Exactly.
No, deify it.
Yes.
Deify
Yes.
it. Understand that it is the divine
Yes.
that has become everything.
That's right. Even done
God in, that's the title of this talk. God in everything.
in everything. Right.
And that's why Dennis dog-eared that page.
Yes. And even Don Juan said to Carlos Castaneda, world is not what you think it is.
Oh, yes.
Drop your self-importance. So he kept on telling him throughout, just it is not the way you think the world is. That is very true.
Yes, stop indulging in your self-importance and your fear.
Exactly. Drop the self-importance
But
and
that was Castaneda's way of going about
this world.
it.
Yeah.
You know, each of us has our own unique way of going about
Yes.
it. Don Juan's instructions to us
That's all.
would be different than they were to Castaneda, because he
Yeah.
would be teaching, he would be taking each of us as an apprentice.
Yes.
But the general principles apply. If you emphasize self-importance,
Yes. That's
what do
right.
you got? You got that small self
That's the ego.
going around, strutting around and saying how important it is.
Yes. This page is a very powerful page, Brother Shankara. This
It
has
is indeed.
information.
That's why we stopped here.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's why we've been talking about it for most of the hour or more.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear. Anyone else? All right. Dearly beloved, a flower at your feet for each one who comes to your open door. A flower at your feet for each one who stands by your open door and says, come to me, come to me. Offering to break this world's chain that binds us down to ignorance, suffering, and death. A flower at your feet for each one who takes the path that you have struck through this, your jungle world. Om, Amen. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be cheerful. May you have peace of mind. Go forward in the divine presence's loving and protective embrace. May the divine presence, the divine being, look over us lovingly as a mother and father. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Hari Om.
Hari Hari Om. Until next time.
Hari Om. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
There's the Saturday class on Swami Prabhavananda's Realizing God, and then on Sunday, because it is just a week from Sri Chaitanya's birthday, and we already have someone scheduled to speak on Sri Chaitanya's birthday, but this coming Sunday, I'll speak on Chaitanya's prayer, the perfect primer. And that prayer is a real humdinger. There'll be lots of requests for a copy of it after the talk, I'm sure. And it'll be available. It'll be uploaded with the talk, so you'll be able to download it, the PDF immediately. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.